So welcome everyone to CORE's Data for Change webinar on publicly available data. We're talking today about how to support your organization's primary data with secondary data. You can go to the next slide. We've got four kind of main objectives for today. We want to talk about the difference between primary and secondary public data. Also review key factors to consider when you're trying to decide if a website is a good source of data. We're going to discuss some of our favorite sources of publicly available data, and then there'll be a very cool demonstration where you can learn how to build reports with the American Community Survey data. Right? Before we kind of dive into the publicly available data set information, we want to do a really quick review on some different types of data, data collection, and data methods. So you've got a bit of a matrix here that can help show the different ways to classify data. If you look at the left side, there's the qualitative and quantitative data. You've probably heard these terms, but qualitative are descriptive data that are interpreted, and then quantitative data are going to be the numeric data. You look across the top, data can be described by the type of source. Administrative data is collected by agencies and governments. Survey data is going to be, answers you get from people from questions that they're asked. And then we have geospatial or GIS data, which contains layers of information related to spatial locations. Obviously, there are a whole bunch of other data collection methods, but these are some that we wanted to just kind of go over briefly. If you look at the boxes, there are some examples of the intersection of the categories. So if you're looking at administrative data, the qualitative data might be organizational documents. If you're looking quantitative, it could be information that that agency is collecting around participant race or ethnicity data. When it comes to surveys, qualitative will be those kind of program participation questions that are open-ended. So any place where people can kind of write in their own answers. Quantitative would be any of the closed-ended questions, kind of like the ones that have that Likert scale that we had earlier with the, very infrequently to all of the time. And then geospatial data, if you look at the qualitative, it could be geonarratives where you're adding spatiotemporal data to narrative accounts or activity mapping. And then quantitative might be participant zip code where you can kind of count the number of folks in each of the zip codes. So to add a layer to this, all of these can be collected in one of two ways, either indirectly or directly. So it's exactly the same data, but it's referring to who's collecting it and who's using it. When we're talking about primary data collection, that's data that you belong to an organization, and that organization is the one that collects the data. Secondary data is data that someone else is collecting. So if you're thinking about, administrative race and ethnicity data collected by OHA, if you're OHA, that's primary data. If you're a CBO, that would be secondary data. And today we're spending most of our time talking about kind of why you would use secondary data, some opportunities to use it, and showing you how. But you might ask, if it's exactly the same data, why have different terms for it? And there are a number of different reasons. One that I think's interesting is kind of, it really relates to your relationship with the data. So if it's primary data, your organization collected, all of the nuances of who was asked what, why you asked certain questions, why you didn't ask other questions, your methodology. When you look at secondary data, a lot of them have a lot of accompanying methodology documentation, but it can't capture all of the nuance and everything that you necessarily need to know. So it's just kind of like how close you are to the data collection that the terms are capturing. We go to the next slide. So why use publicly available data? Data helps you understand your impact. It allows you to be responsive to your client needs. We have an example of a kind of little continuous process from the Capacity Collective. You're doing your work. You might find some public data on needs of the folks that you're serving. And then you can take that and make comparisons with your own data and maybe identify gaps in your current program. So if you know your program serves, 5% Russian speakers, but you get secondary data that indicates that in the population there's 20% of Russian speakers in the folks that you're serving, that might be a gap that you've identified, and you can use it to kind of apply for more funding and expand the program or adjust somehow. So when you analyze this secondary data, when you compare it with publicly available data sets, your data with publicly available data sets, you can leverage it to make evidence-based and informed decisions when it comes to your program, meaningfully compare your organization's impact to others that are doing similar work, uncover new and emerging needs in your community, and then the example I gave, help identify gaps or areas for further development and apply for funding in those areas. And we wanted to share on the next slide a really cool example actually from one of our Data for Change participants of an example of what an organization can do or create when they're supplementing their primary data collection with secondary numbers. So this is about the residents of Rockwood living 10 years shorter than their Portland neighbors. It has information on poor health outcomes, scoring the worst on 16 of the 19 key health indicators in the metro area. Food insecurity, Rockwood has one major grocery store where the surrounding neighbors have 13. And this is information where instead of you going around and counting all of the grocery stores, you're able to access that from somewhere else. Homelessness and housing crisis, the average household income is almost 50% lower compared to Portland neighbors. And you can take all of that information that you presented, all of that secondary data, to kind of have that impact statement down at the bottom. If Multnomah County were divided into two states, the west side of the county would be one of the wealthiest states in the US, and the east side would be one of the poorest. So it can be very impactful. And Taylor a little later is going to go into more depth about specific sites and give some really good information there. But really quickly, some types of data and ideas of where to find them. If you're looking at health outcomes, you might want to go to OHA, and it looked from the poll that a couple of people already do. County health departments, national health surveys, local community health assessments. For demographics, American Community Survey looked quite popular, and it's something that you can use. Social determinants of health, again, the ACS, Feeding America, public health data at any level, county, state, federal, Oregon Hunger Task Force, point in time counts from counties, just a variety of different examples. So if you go, I said that we were going to talk about some considerations when it came to you exploring websites and trying to decide kind of what you want to use. So if you go to the next slide, yeah. Here's some questions to ask yourself when you're doing your search. Big one at the front is the site reputable? Nice, easy way. Is it a .gov, .org, .edu? If it's something else, potentially proceed with caution when it comes to using that data. How user-friendly is the site? It shouldn't be onerous to find once you're on the website. So if you're really struggling with it to kind of find the useful info, that might be an indication that you don't want to spend too much time hunting for it. And then, is there contact information available for someone that you can ask questions of? There might be someone on the report who's listed or someone on the website who can answer questions or repull data in ways that are more helpful than what's currently listed. And this is something that CORE has done. There have been situations where we wanted to see the data, kind of filtered differently or kind of that kind of thing. And we couldn't do it with the data that was available. So we were able to reach out, and people can be very helpful about giving you the kind of repulled data. More questions. How useful is the data that's available? So some questions here are they the right level, geography, time? Do they help frame contextual information for the story that you're telling? And if it's not quite your community, are there regional data that can serve as a proxy? You might not be able to find specifically the population or the geographic area that you're looking for, but there might be something similar enough or close enough. Like it says here, may not be one for your purposes, but can be used, you can contextualize it, you can use it to generate ideas. It might still be useful. And then other things to ask, I mentioned earlier, understanding the methodology. So asking, what's the methodology used to collect the data? What's the source of the available data? And then, what's the timeliness of it? You might find exactly what you're looking for, but if it's 20 years old, you might have to consider whether or not that's going to be helpful or supportive of what you need. And then finally, are the data downloadable? It can be really helpful to be able to pull the information yourself, because then you can ask questions of the data that it may not be currently showing in whatever report, and you can do your own filtering and looking at it. So that can be a cool thing to consider. And now, the next slide, I'm going to hand it over to Taylor to talk about sites of interest.
Thank you, Claire. Yeah, so I'm going to walk through a couple of sites pretty quickly before I get to a little bit of more of a demonstration. Just going to highlight a few sites. I did put together a longer list of sites both at a national level and the state of Oregon level that we were trying to figure out how to share the file, and I think sadly Providence has stunted our ability to do that in easy ways. So we have it available for email. It will eventually hopefully be attached or posted wherever this webinar gets posted for folks of you who are watching this asynchronously. Hopefully you'll find it too. Anyway, so this is super not comprehensive. It's some of our favorites / some of the ones that we discovered along the way of putting together the list. So it's a good read. It'll pass the time, I'm sure. So I was going to stop sharing because I do actually want to take us to websites. So I'm going to stop sharing and then start sharing again differently, hopefully. Technology is sometimes complicated for me, so we'll see how it goes. Okay, so okay, so I'm going to share here we go. Hopefully you're seeing this Alice slide. Is that true, Claire? Alice? Okay, cool. So Alice is actually a site that we were just about a year ago, one of our Data for Change partners turned us on to this website. It's kind of cool. It's basically targeting the population that is just has just more income than what the federal government defines as low, like the federal poverty level. So they're people who are above FPL, but still not really able to make ends meet with the finances that they have. So it's a United Way collects these data. About half of the states of the country are participating in it, but it's got some really cool stuff. Oregon is a state that participates, so you can come into the website and they have different state reports. So if we wanted to look at Oregon's report, I've already clicked on it. Basically, if you click here, it'll download the report, but I saved time earlier by pre-downloading it. Look at me go. So it's a bit of a 31-page long document, and it's got some really cool just metrics and other things that they walk you through. And it's kind of recent. Again, we're in a strange time in the world where like COVID happened and it disrupted everything really. And so it's interesting as we're trying to like find data these days, like trying to like look at it. Okay, is it pre-COVID? Is it post-COVID? what is even post-COVID, but how post is post-COVID, and so it's Claire walked us through some of the questions to ask, and just even framing those questions contextually is really important right now. So 2021 is not super. COVID was still a thing. It's still technically a thing. I appreciate that, but whatever. So just as you're going through these things, like you're going to want to like contextualize that. And just because the report is, from 2021 doesn't necessarily mean the data are from that range too. So the questions Claire walked us through, like I can pretty easily see like information about that. And then this whole document defines methodology. And so this is cool. This, again, the Alice data is sort of that not FPL, but just above FPL. And so it walks you through what the method for defining that population, that income level is. So this is really rich data source that is targeting a little bit of a unique population in that sense. So that's cool. Another one we wanted to highlight for any of those orgs who need to look at information about kids. One of our go-to resources is the Annie E. Casey Foundation. They have this Kids Count data center, and it has a lot of robust information available. So click on it, it'll bring you to this page. You can scroll down. Obviously, it's got all the states, but we're probably only caring about Oregon. So click on Oregon, and then it's a pretty interactive dashboard. You can, this is where I would check for information about, oh, I can actually like email somebody. That's really cool. So if I wanted to do that follow up and ask, a lot of times I find people really want to talk about their data. Like they've collected it, they're passionate about it, they actually want to talk about it. And so they'll engage in conversations and try to help you, within reason, get the information you need. You can see that this, again, this is child specific, but you can choose into, like delve into any of these topics here. So if we're just coming to economic well-being, you can even see there are like subcategories. So you can really target like, okay, what can I discover about, kids in housing? And then if I filter the list, then I can see like these are sort of reports that are available about kids in Oregon related to housing. So that's a really great resource. Lots to dig into that. This next one, some of you already referenced OHA data. I know that OHA is a massive state agency. It's got a lot of rich data. The Public Health Department is one of the sites that has the most data. So if we're coming into that website, sorry, I'm trying not to click on the thing that's gonna close my screen. I'll just click it again. You can see that the Public Health Department, it's lots and lots of different reports and surveys and registries. So they have a plethora of options to dig into here. Some of the ones that we tend to use that you might or might not be familiar with are it's called BRFIS, or this Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System. So BRFIS is a survey of adults that is really targeting sort of some of their not risky behaviors, but like it asks about like smoking or even cancer screening, and so you can get information about the survey at the county level. You can see that they have a lot of older data, but not necessarily these are all the archived ones. So this one is the survey. It takes a long time, and it takes a long time to analyze. So these are definitely some of the data that are available, but maybe not in a super timely way. But BRFIS can be good. Another one that we sometimes have gotten use from is used to be the Oregon Healthy Teen Survey, but now Student Health Survey. So this is a survey that's conducted. School districts have to opt into it, but they try to conduct this across school districts across the state, asking, I think, 6th, 8th, and 11th graders questions about everything ranging from the nutrition that they have, to their experiences with bullying, to what do they do after school. And so a lot of the information from that we've used to contextualize, maybe your community wants to start an after school program, but you're not sure, is there like interest in that, like, and so you can kind of dive into that and see if there's a gap, within the after school programs, and whether or not the students say that, yeah, that's something they're interested in. And again, these are like obviously not especially timely, because of the time it takes to field the survey and then analyze it, but they've got a lot of rich data going back a number of years. And then the last one we sort of wanted to highlight before we dive into the census is the Population Research Center at PSU. It's for Oregon. This one can be helpful because it has similar information that the census has, but it has a little bit more timely. So it has both population estimates and forecasts. So you can get information in a little bit more of a timely fashion than you might be able to find at the census. And so you can come into here and sort of click around, and then they've got the just different things that they've published, and here's their forecast. Then you can see like past reports and all of those things. So that's for their forecasts, and then here's their estimates. So you can click around a little bit. They also have cool maps. One of the reasons I want to talk about them. They have cool maps. I like the map, and I've spent lots of time looking at these maps. They're kind of cool. Mostly showing the change from the 2010 census to the 2020 census. But yeah, here's those changes in Oregon race and ethnicity. I clicked on one earlier. Oh yeah, here's one of the maps. This census blocks in Oregon cities and counties. So I was clicking on it and I was looking down, and we have some data for change participants down in Medford. So I was just, the red, I think must be the census blocks. So obviously, as you get into more metro area, the census blocks get smaller and there are more of them. So I was just kind of looking around at it. Maps can be super useful, especially when you're adding layers to them. Like that's how they become useful, so you can contextualize within regions, because believe it or not, things are different for people based on where they live. So those are the ones that we sort of wanted to highlight, just casually, but we did want to walk through a couple things about the census. So the census, I think we're all familiar with the census in terms of like they do the big decennial. Am I saying that right? That's whatever, the big 10-year census. And so we just all went through one in 2020. I was actually missed. I was living in a tiny house and then somebody's backyard at the time, so my family didn't get counted. I still feel guilty about it, but it's fine, I'm sure. So the Census Bureau has so many sites, but I discovered the Census Survey Explorer, which is kind of cool because the census does more than just that 10-year census. It has a ton of researchers who are doing a ton of surveys. So this is actually just a site where you can explore all of the surveys that the census does. And so this is a little interactive where you can come in, and the ACS, that's not the ACS. There's the ACS. The ACS, I think I saw a couple people reference that they're already familiar with it. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, the ACS is a really rich resource we're going to dive into a little bit here in a few minutes. But there are a bunch of other other surveys, and you can also, like, this is interactive where you can click into it. So if you wanted to come in, learn about housing surveys that the census does that target housing questions, you can click that, and then it'll sort of whittle the list down. And so then you can come in and sort of explore here. Some of these are ongoing surveys, some of them are historic, and some of them are historic back like 40 years, and some of them, I think this household pulse survey, if I am remembering correctly, is one that they started, oh yeah, during the pandemic. So some of them, like, basically they all have different timelines. That's what I'm trying to say there. So this survey explorer can be really helpful, but coming back to the PowerPoint, I wanted to walk a little bit through the ACS because it is such a rich data source and it's not necessarily user friendly or intuitive. So I know I struggle with it every time I go to the website, but some of the tips and tricks I've learned about the ACS, I just wanted to document here for what it's worth in case it's helpful to other people. So for those of us who are less familiar, it's basically an annual survey. It's a sample survey, so it's not a big like the 10-year census, but it's a annual survey of samples within the off years. They might actually field it in the years that they do the regular big census, but possibly not. I don't know. And then they combine the responses. Well, I'll get to that in a second. But anyway, they ask a lot of sort of social determinants of health information, which is why it's such a popular resource for so many researchers. So information on educational attainment, income, migration, disability, employment, and housing characteristics. So that's a big list, and those lists, there can be a lot of things that are contained in those lists, and you can see even here they create a series of different tables or profiles. These detailed tables, I'm saying this now, it might not make sense to some of us in this context, but I'll try to loop back around to it when we actually look at some tables. The base tables or collapsed tables, so tables that start with the letter B or C, those are sort of among these detailed tables. And even those detailed tables, they have over 20,000 variables. So like they're collecting a lot of data, and it's sometimes hard to know what you want. So it's worth your time to try to like poke around and get to where you're going. In addition to the detailed tables, which are sort of population counts and reported at a block group level, there are then the subject tables, and those begin with the letter S, and those are kind of what we were just talking about with the educational attainment, the income, the housing, those are the subjects. And they report the population counts and percentages. They have over 18,000 variables in that data set. And then they do cool things and sort of create data profiles or comparison profiles with the data that they from the detailed and subject tables. So the data profiles start with the letters DP. They do have fewer variables, just 1,000. But those are sort of where they're sort of marrying the types of subject data with the numbers to create these profiles. This would be sort of my recommendation if you're struggling to know where to start. Like this is because they've already started merging those data together. This might be a good place for you to start if you're starting and don't know where to go. Don't know where to start. This might be the place. And then similarly, there are comparison profiles. So that actually will take the current year of data that they have and compare it to they have 5-year profile, 5-year data. So they'll compare current year to the last 5 years, previous 5 years. And then they'll look for, they'll include any statistical significance testing. So those are kind of interesting if you want to look for change over time. And those comparison profiles start with CP. So getting a little bit more into detail about those 1-year, 5-year things. They also used to have 3-year, which is even more confusing. They stopped producing them back with the 2011, 2013 versions. So probably not recently enough that it's worth you remembering that they used to have 3-year, but they did. For those of us who have been looking at these data a long time. So there are 1-year estimates and then 1-year supplemental estimates and then 5-year estimates. And this table sort of walks you through like, okay, what does that mean? So 1-year estimates are less reliable than the 5-year. but they are the most current data. So there's a trade-off there. If you're looking for super current, you might want the 1 year. If you're looking for stable and reliable, then definitely the 5 year. I stole this from the census. I'm not gonna. I'm confessing to copying and pasting this table from the census. They have good information here. I didn't see the need to recreate it. So you can see here why you would use, or when you would use which one. So I did note it can be kind of like tempting to compare non-overlapping 5 years. What that means is like maybe I'm gonna get 5 years wrong because I always do math wrong in my head, but I think 2018 through 2022 is 5 years, or is that 4 years? It is 6 years. Doesn't matter. Anyway, there's they have 5 year estimates that go different 5 year chunks, and the urge to maybe compare a 5 year estimate that doesn't have the same 5 years as the other 5 year estimate you're looking at, you might have that urge, but they recommend not doing that because of reasons. So it's best to compare the same 5 year period to the same 5 year period in that way. So we're going to do a little bit of an ACS demonstration now, which is something, like I said earlier, I use a lot of ACS data. I struggle sometimes when I'm on this website, so we're going to struggle together. It's going to be fun. But you can come to this website and you can actually type in right here. They're even showing you things that you can search for. So you can type in like the thing that you're looking for, the place you're looking for it, and the time you're looking for it. So you can do that. Or there's also this advanced search feature, which we're just going to dive right into. So if you click on that advanced search, basically brings you to this user interface. So there's a search bar at the top. This is where you might want to look for like a topic. So if we're just thinking of looking into, excuse me, SNAP, you can type in the topic up there, and it'll bring up all of the things, all of the reports tables, I guess, more that have information about SNAP. And you can see here, this is tying back into the B, starts with the letter B, C, S. So S for subject. So this is really about like the SNAP nutrition assistance program, and then B for the base table. So that's sort of why I bothered talking about the letters of the tables. But this is like still pretty overwhelming. I feel overwhelmed by this, at least. So maybe we wanted to only find information about SNAP sort of in a region. So if we come here, we can like change our geography. You can do it at the state level, but I actually tend to, even within the state of Oregon or other states we're looking at, tend to want to do counties. So I generally click on county, and then you can select the state and then the counties. But if you click on state first, you can only do at the state level. So if you click on county, then you can click or not click each county individually, but you can even go at smaller locations than county. Not all counties have the county subdivision or the zip code, or even census tract or block, but I think a lot of them do. But if we were just doing this for the sake of today, let's say Hood River. So now we've selected Hood River, and we can see over here on this pane that we've got two filters going. And sometimes if that pane gets hidden somehow because we click somewhere in the wrong spot, we can still see there's two filters here, and we can click that, and this will open back up. So we can see that we're at SNAP in Hood River. And then it opened up this thing over here on the right, which is a little bit of a county profile by the looks of it. And it tells us other things we can look for that are related. But here we can see that this list is still populated with a bunch of options. So we can sort of like scroll through. I think the thing that's catching my eye right now is maybe the receipt of food stamps in the past 12 months by race of householder, Black or African American and alone. So if we click into that, it actually opens a table. And so we can sort of resize the windows here or close altogether. And we could see that in Hood River County, which is at the header here of the table, there are 30 households who received SNAP in the past 12 months. And then back up here is the table that we're looking at. So by my reading of that, that would be 30 households received SNAP in the past 12 months who had members who are Black or African American alone in the household. So that's sort of how that all works, which is all well and good. Not especially interesting in the sense of like sometimes there's the map, but am I?
Taylor, just wanted to
Yes.
give you a 15-minute warning.
Oh, okay, good. I was gonna say not especially interesting, and I discovered a different resource that I'd like to spend more time on anyway. So thank you, Abby, for that. So back in 2022, they started this My Community Explorer, which is blending the ACS data with a couple other data sources, and this one is more user friendly in terms of like point and click and maps. So let's spend time there. So My Community Explorer, newer than the ACS, but does have ACS data as part of it. There's this nice tour that you can take. We're going to skip it for right now. It's 16 steps, but not worth our time right now, worth your time later on if you come back to it. And if you decide actually to skip it and then you say, oh, actually, just kidding, this is not as intuitive as I thought it might be. They do have a YouTube video linked here in this demo button up at the top. And this whole bar up here is actually pretty informative in terms of walking you through the data sources, the methodology, all the things. And that video can be worth your time. This right here is an interactive map. Right now, it's actually displaying the Census Bureau and emergency response. So right now, there are fires that are being displayed. I had to look it up because I got interested. It's interesting. It's an interesting map. So the white and red are fires, and they are geographically where the fire is happening. And then the yellow and orange are also fires, but they are new fires. So within the last 24 hours, these fires have all started. That might not be what you came to this website to learn about, though. So you can click into this button right here as layers, and you can turn off and turn on layers. They recommend, if you watch the video, turning off before you turn on. So I'm going to turn off that emergency preparedness layer, and then maybe look for something that's slightly more, not that we don't all care about fires, but information that might be more applicable to why you're poking around. So selecting the language spoken at home, in English less than very well. Sort of like changes the colors. There's this bar over here that sort of describes as a key what the colors mean. I find it really hard to know where the sliders are, and it's oddly like split into 3 sections, and it's all just weird. But I did discover that information is also right here next to the layer button that I had clicked as the legend button. So if you click into that, then it'll nicely display the legend right here. And then you can sort of zoom into the map. So you can see more information as you zoom. So as we zoom, we can compare sort of the blue here against the blue here. Those blues look like they match. So in these counties, it looks like the percent of households with limited English speaking status is between 3.5 and 8% in these blue counties. That, is one thing, one layer, but then if we wanted to change it up, we could change it. And now looking at race and ethnicity, looking at the key there. If you start zooming in even tighter, you can actually see those census blocks start showing up. And again, this is possibly more meaningful in more metro areas, more urban areas, but they are populated for all areas. So you can sort of dive into like differences. So this is where I get slightly confused because that little peachy color, I'm not sure if I recognize the same peachy color over here. But anyway, that is sort of how you can dive into the map, just zooming. And then you can click into anywhere. If we click into sort of this census tract, it'll pop up with this information, and you can see here that there are like indicators that there's multiple pages, which is really cool. You can see that we're in census tract 98.01. It's in Multnomah County. It's got some information about, social vulnerability, which if we wanted to figure out what that meant, we could read about the data source that's telling us about social vulnerability. It's got this table that's sort of like describing this census tract's population and comparing it to the national estimate. So in this specific census tract, the population that is Hispanic or Latino is 33%, and that is higher than the national estimate. And so that's sort of how that table works. And it's got all of these sort of metrics. It's got information about the urban, rural information, mostly urban, age, disability, how many occupied housing units with more than with 1.51 occupants or more per room. So it's not statistically different. So just lots of great information. And then if we click over here, we can get even more information about like the percent of population below the poverty level, the broadband subscription, like just the whole rich data source here. And then if that's not enough, you can click here and that'll take you into even more information. So this one sort of will walk you through the things that we were just looking at, but with more detail, and then with these sort of graphs to the side. So you can see here the total population of census tract is 3,800. The Multnomah County is 800,000. Oregon is 4.2 million, and then the US 331,000 or 331 million. This graph is not very meaningful. Of course, the census tract is going to have fewer people than the county, which is going to have fewer people than the state, which is going to have fewer people than the country. But and some, like if you click, into any of these other categories, you can see actually, the census tract has proportionally more Black or African American folks than does Multnomah County, and both of those regions have more than Oregon, and so on and so forth. So lots of great information there, and then some socioeconomic characteristics. If you need, sometimes we look at travel time or folks who can't access, transit to get to appointments, like all of the things that you might need to build, to use to build the story that you're telling with these secondary data are really rich here. Even some housing characteristics. And then there's some business summary information, which I haven't figured out how to make useful yet for me. You can see here that the source is the ACS data. So again, it's that same site that we were just looking at, but slightly more user-friendly, more intuitive for me, at least, ways to get to those same data. And if we go back to My Community Explorer, I'm gonna go real quick because I just looked at the time. You can do these buttons at the bottom are all about the county profiles. So in order to make those work, you have to select step 1 and step 2, your state and county. So if we go down to Oregon and we select I don't know, let's do Clatsop County. You can see there's like this nice dashboard that is already put together. So it's got some economic indicators here, and you can see they've cited, at the bottom of each graph where those data are coming from. Here's our C table, and here's our DP table. Back to the ACS stuff. These are all clickable. Then social characteristics, race and ethnicity, and then a business profile for the county. So this one I thought was a really great resource, and like I said, it's new in the last few years, so we wanted to spend a little bit more time on it than the other ACS website, which is great too, but harder to use. Going to stop. No, I'm not going to stop sharing. I'm going to go back to PowerPoint, and I'm going to say Claire kicked us off at the beginning of this talking about next week's data exchange. I want to plug that too. Same time, same place next week, a week from today.